Dawn Stevens was not allowed out past sundown, and she certainly wasn't allowed out past midnight. Her mother had drilled that into her head from such a young age that it was virtually second nature. But tonight, her mother had been dreadfully frustrating, so Dawn alighted her first-story window and stole into the night. A brisk 5 minutes from the Stevens residence was the park Dawn was so fond of. There were 2 parks in the town of Newpool, one on the wealthy side of town, she wasn't allowed there. The other one snaked through the backwoods, held together by rusty chains and flimsy plastic. The town built it in the acreage behind the community church, where parents reasoned that they, if not their deity, would be able to watch their kids more easily as they played. Not that this reality applied to Dawn, of course, as she now walked without parent down a paved path illuminated by the faint moonlight. Freedom and exhilaration flowed through her as she skipped cheerfully along the trail past the church grounds. No one is going to be here at this hour, she supposed, so I have the park all to myself. But as she continued to hop jovially down the concrete path, she soon understood that her fantasy was not yet to be realized. She was not alone. A single boy, who appeared just a little older than Dawn, was seated upon one of the several metal lattice benches that lined the park pathway. His striped button-up tee and ribbed blue dress pants were sun-bleached and dilapidated. He wore a pair of scuffed black dress shoes that dangled in the air, unmoving as he sat. Though he looked strange, and undoubtedly was so, Dawn felt drawn to him. He didn't seem harmful, at least from a distance, and her mother was no longer there to reprimand her for slowly approaching the odd boy as she was now. She stopped an arm's length away from him. "Hello!" Dawn waved her hand energetically. The boy said nothing to her, nor did he bother raising his gaze to meet hers. "Well, that's awfully rude," Dawn mused. "Did he even hear me?" Taking a small step closer, she crouched down to get a better look at him. She could now tell that his short hair was a dirty blonde, and most of it was stuffed haphazardly into a gray corduroy newsboy cap. The boy's skin was bone pale, and his tired eyes stared into the concrete with an inattentive focus. Tentatively, Dawn reached out her small, delicate hand and brushed the lanky fingers that dangled over the boy's knee. As her fingertips grazed his, he startled to attention, leaping backwards dramatically. Well, leaping as much as he could, of course. The metal back of the park bench caught him, and he gripped it so hard his knuckles turned even whiter than his skin. He was like a cornered child, desperately hoping that the walls behind him would give way for his escape. "Oh gosh, I'm so sorry I scared you," Dawn said, taking a step backwards. "I didn't mean to, honest. I just wanted to say hi." The boy looked her up and down as he gripped the bench. Dawn was relatively unformidable. At 10 years old, her stature hardly evoked fear. The boy slowly lowered himself back down. He still said nothing, though he breathed raggedly. "Why are you out here all alone? You do know how late it is, right?" Dawn asked. He raised his eyes to meet hers. As they narrowed, Dawn couldn't help but feel the boy was judging her, too. "Well, never mind that. I came here to play, but instead I met you. Did you want to come play with me?" It didn't seem to be much of an extraordinary question to Dawn, but the boy still acted puzzled. She reached out her hand again. This time, he hardly recoiled at all. His grip was gentle and cold, as though she were holding hands with a winter's breeze. When he stood up from his familiar seat, she could tell he was taller than her by a few inches. Mom always said that boys grew up bigger, but Dawn had become used to being taller than the boys in her grade. Not fair, she thought, pouting at him. She tugged at his arm and led him along the tar-paved path. The boy let himself be pulled like a party balloon, floating toward wherever Dawn was taking him. And he followed her this way until she tied him down again, this time on the rubber seat of a children's swing set. She sat down on the adjacent swing, but the boy looked at her, tilting his head like a confused puppy. "Really? You've never been on a swing before? Fine, just try doing what I do." Dawn began raising and lowering her legs, slowly building momentum until she could go no higher. The boy watched her giggling and swinging gracefully, and turned toward his own legs with a newfound purpose. At the apex of her swing, Dawn turned to look back at the boy, who was flailing his legs in the exact manner she displayed. However, he hadn't gained a single inch of height. In the darkness, she could hardly tell whether the rubber seat was moving at all. It was amusing, in a pathetic way. Dawn scraped the soles of her feet against the dirt, slowing her momentum to a stop. "You can't do it?" Dawn stood up and hustled behind the boy, who was staring dejectedly at his feet. Suddenly, the boy felt a push against the small of his back, and the swing shot up a few inches. Though he was much lighter than any boy she had ever met before, Dawn was only able to push the swing a few times before keeling over in exhaustion. The boy slowed to a halt. He stepped off the swing and turned his body to look at Dawn. Again, he tilted his head, but his eyes shone concern rather than confusion. "I'm okay," she reassured him. "I do this with my baby brother all the time." She stood back up, her breathing steadied. "So we can't swing. What kid doesn't know how to swing?" Dawn again reached out and gripped his icy palm, pulling him away from the swing set. The two joined back with the concrete pavement. He held her hand loosely as they walked. What's something he would know? Suddenly, Dawn was pulled to a stop from behind. Surprised, she swung around and noticed the boy intently staring at the ground below them. A pastel arrangement of boxes was carved into the ground with schoolyard chalk. "Do you know this game?" Dawn asked. "It's hopscotch. Here, let me show you." She dropped his palm and raced forward. A pile of discarded pebbles was placed next to the chalk frame, so Dawn pinched one for example purposes. The boy's gaze was still wide, but he focused on Dawn's instructions intently. "So, you just do this." She tossed the pebble into the first block. "And then hop a bunch like this. On one leg, then two, then one again." Dawn danced through the course with the ease of a playground veteran. The boy stared at her, transfixed by her movements. She reached the end of the line, gave a final heroic leap, and then struck a pose. "Just like that," she giggled. Impressed, he strode up to the beginning and tossed his rock. 1 foot, 2, 1 foot. Hey, he doesn't seem too bad at this one. But even though he seemed to know the fundamentals, the boy's movements were so bizarre. Sometimes it looked as though he were unrestrained by gravity, his movements floaty and sluggish. And soon enough, on step 6, the boy tripped over his own leg and gently toppled to the ground. "Oh gosh, are you all right?" Dawn ran up to him as he lifted himself off the scuffed pavement. She grasped his palms and turned them over, scouring them for scrapes or bruises. They were pristine still, as though he had just washed up for dinner time. Nothing? Not even a little dirt? "How strange," she muttered. In return, the stoic child's mouth curled slightly, and he gave a subtle smirk. Dawn looked at the sky. The night, though still oppressively dark, was leaking a pale pink against the horizon. "Come on, we have to go now. It's almost morning already." The two hurried separately toward the park's exit, an outlet that looped around the church steeple and led out on a main street. When she finally turned to check on him, he had already abandoned their flight. Instead, he stood impatiently a few yards away. She strode over to the boy, who was peering over the metal fence of the churchyard. "The cemetery? You want to go there? Why?" Dawn asked, recoiling her face in disapproval. "It's scary over there. We might see a ghost, or a zombie." She shuddered. But she'd never seen the boy so determined, and for the first time that night, she wasn't able to pull him away from where he stood. This time, the boy led Dawn along as she cowered behind him. He brought her past entire generations of graves. Grandparents, mothers, fathers, and children laid side by side in eternal rest under their feet as they walked. A chilly autumn breeze threw Dawn's long hair about, shrouding her vision. "Where are we going?" she demanded. Her nervous jitters were masqueraded with the chill of the wind. He stopped suddenly. Hardly being able to see, Dawn stumbled through him and let go of his hand, which had grown warm through their contact. She regained her balance and turned to look at what had caught the boy's attention. It was a single tombstone, dilapidated and grayed by time. Moss inched over its unpolished surface, and the cursive memorial once carefully engraved into the stone face was rendered unreadable by time. He kneeled in front of it, tracing the concave cross with his fingertips. She sank down beside him, uneasy about squatting over someone's grave. Dawn still didn't understand what he was so interested in. As the fuchsia front slowly engulfed the sky and light spilled out from beyond the treetops, the boy took hold of her hand and smiled heartily. Tears spilled from the corners of his eyes and fell to the sparse dirt below him. He still said nothing, but neither could she. The boy's appearance wavered. Through her own tears, now realizing their time together was ending, Dawn could hardly focus on the boy. Every time she blinked, there was less and less of him to see. And every time her eyes blurred, so did he. The morning sun crested over the spruce-lined horizon. He was no longer there. And for hours afterwards, his presence lingered like dust in a sunbeam.